Okay, so في هالchapter unit 8 we're gonna be talking about chi-squared. Okay, وهال chi-squared is basically a test that we could do to see if there is any association between two categorical variables. Okay, تتذكرون كنا نتكلم about numerical variables. الحين عنا شو categorical variables. What do I mean by that? يعني I have two categorical variables مثلا smoking, okay, and lung diseases. Okay, so each one is a variable. وهذا is a categorical variable وهذا is a categorical variable. And what I want to do is find a relationship between smoking and lung disease. How do I find if there is a relationship or association between two categorical variables? You use chi-squared. Okay, so jump into this mess. I'm not gonna go to the PowerPoint and I'm not shifted PowerPoint and I don't care. Okay, so the simple equation of chi-squared, okay, is equal to the summation of the observed minus the expected كله squared over E. Okay, شو يعني observed؟ شو يعني expected؟ I'll explain a bit. I'm not gonna explain من جيبي. I'm just gonna again give an example to you. From that example I'll base everything. Okay, مثل ما I was talking to I'm telling you إن في two categorical data or variables. عنا lung diseases عنا smoking. في هالسؤال they want to see if there's an association between these two variables. Okay, أعطوكم a table and this is what they show observed. This is the data collected. So this is the observed data. Okay, بس أنا يوم كنت قاعدة أسوي or I saw the equation في for the chi-squared في the observed وفي the expected. Where's the expected numbers? How expected numbers I'm gonna calculate. But before you start going into this, I'll tell you the general structure of how to solve a chi-squared question or whatever. The first thing you're gonna do is write down the hypothesis. Okay, well hypothesis بس يعني because it's two, you're gonna say or you're gonna write the null hypothesis and you're gonna write the alternative hypothesis. In this case the null hypothesis دوم يقول شو إنه the null hypothesis says that there is no association between the two variables. Okay, variables, whatever. The alternative hypothesis states that there is an association between the two variables. Association between the two variables. Okay, so this is my hypothesis. And I'm saying that there's an association between smoking and lung diseases, but the null hypothesis always assumes that there is no association between the two categorical variables. This next thing you're gonna do is get the expected data. Okay, نحن ليش نبغى expected data? Again, look at the equation. في an expected part. I don't have the values. I need to calculate them. Do we have the observed data? Yes, هذا بكبرى is the observed data. So I can now go ahead and use or get the expected data by an equation which is the E equals to the row total. I'll explain all of this right now, but I'm just going over the general structure of how we solve these questions. Times the column total over the grand total. Grand total meaning the sum basically of like everything in the table. Okay, and then the third step is now you're gonna use the stat or test statistic. Okay, and then you're gonna, which is basically the x, you're gonna get this value, okay, which is also the x calculated. And I say x calculated ما أدري انتوا شو تبون تقولون. And then you're gonna get the x from the table of the chi-squared. Okay, طبعا we calculated this from شو, from an equation. Which equation? This equation. And then we need the variable or the x, the chi-squared from the table. هذا طبعا it depends on two things: the significance level, significance level مثلا من يبقون 0.05 or whatever, but then they're gonna give you مثلا the degree of freedom. How do you calculate? To calculate the degree of freedom in these types of questions, we're not gonna use n-1. Degree of freedom goal can stand at n-1. هني we don't have number of samples. We just have the total. We have 90, we have 60, we have 30, we have 20. We don't have each or how many individuals. We have the total individuals بس يعني كيف أشرح لكم إياه? Don't think too much about it. المهم it's a long story. So the way you find the degree of freedom is r-1, c-1. شو r, شو c? C is columns. So how many columns you have? Rows is r is how many rows you have. Here we have 2 columns, 2 rows. You plug, we are gonna get the degree of freedom. Okay? And the 5th step, خلاص, you're gonna come to a conclusion. How do you come to a conclusion? You compare the x table squared, okay, with the x calculate or the chi-squared calculated. الحين if the x table squared is bigger than the x, ليش تم أقول the chi squared calculated. هني what you're gonna do ليش قلت what you're gonna do is خلينا نطلع the numbers ما يطلع غلط حد يصيح علي بعدين. okay, هني if it's equal we're gonna fail to reject the null hypothesis or basically H naught. okay, the chi-squared table طلع أصغر عن the chi-squared calculated. هني basically we're just gonna be like we're directly gonna reject the null hypothesis, meaning that there is an association between the two categorical variables. Okay, so this is like the general structure of how we solve these questions. And الحين let's go for again بحط السؤال again. okay, والسؤال شو يقول؟ we have 2 categorical variables and the smoking and شو lung disease. We want to find if there's an association between them. Is there a significant association between smoking status and lung disease at 0.05 level of significance? They gave you the level of significance. Okay, so أنا أول شيء شو قلت? We're gonna write the null hypothesis. Okay, the null hypothesis, no association. طبعا كتبوا the whole thing. There is no association between smoking status and lung disease. The alternative hypothesis states that there is an association between lung disease and smoking status. Okay, خلصنا the first part. الحين second part. We're gonna replicate this table again. هذا التيبل شو نسميه؟ أنا أحب write فوقه observed data. And I need another table اسمه the expected data. I need to generate another table. بسوي نفس التable again. Okay. Lung disease. No lung disease. Sorry على الخط الخايس بس يعني just for the sake of time. Smoker and non-smoker. Okay. Are the values اللي داخل نفس الشيء؟ لا طبعا. This is an expected data. This is based on a ratio. So this is what we're supposed to find. الحين how are you gonna get this? أول شيء you're gonna go to this table. Okay. I'll do the table again هني عشان أشوي شو كنت بسوي. So duplicate. Okay. حطيها هني. Okay. Let's just write this as the observed data. واللي تحت ال expected. ال observed هو نفس التيبل اللي فوق بس أنا I'll just add كمان شيء. Okay. So شو كانوا ال values 60 لا شو كانوا ال values 90 60 30 120. Okay. الحين أنا بطلع الرقم اللي هني والرقم اللي هني والرقم اللي هني والرقم اللي هني. Okay. So أنا قلت لكم فوق في an equation to get the expected values. Look at the equation when expected values. So the expected value for مثلا the expected value for this place, okay, is basically the row total times the column total over the grand total. شو قاعد أخربط أنا الحين؟ Basically if you go back to this table, the first thing you want to do is تطلعون the total of هذا هذا يعني هذا is the row, these are rows, these are columns. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is بطلع التوتال كامل مني, so it's 90 plus 60 which is شو 150, 30 plus 120 is 150, 90 plus 30 is 120, 60 plus 90 is 180. التوتال بيطلع 300. ليش؟ التوتال هذا مع هذا بيطلع 300 وهذا التوتال مع هذا بيطلع 300. لأن في السؤال قالوا لكم the sample كبرى is 300 adults. So the total should make sense إنه if you add all of these numbers up المفروض يطلع لنا 300. Okay. الحين طلعت لكم ال values مال the rows and columns. Okay. أنا بطلع the value مال هذا اللي هني. كيف أطلعه؟ بسوي for أول هالمكان اللي هني which is شو smokers and lung disease. So for smokers and lung disease بيكون 150 times 120 كله over 300 grand total, يعني the whole total of the whole sample or the number of adults in this study. Okay, 150 من وين جبتها؟ هذا شوفوا, look at the 90. Okay, the row total of where 90 is 150. The column total of where 90 is 120. I'll take these two values, multiply them with each other, بيطلع لي اللي هني over 300. فبيطلع لي a value of 60. Okay. الحين بطلع ال value مال هني. ال value مال هني شو smokers and no lung diseases. So smokers and no lung diseases. Again أبى أسوي the row total. الرو total يعني الفاليو اللي كان هني فوق, و the column total الرقم اللي هني بضرب هالرقم بهالرقم in this table. Okay, so شو بسوي 150 times 180 over 300. وين يبتدي 150 هذول 150, وين يبتدي 180 هذول 180. multiply with each other divide by grand total بيطلع لكم 90. You're gonna do the same thing over here. هذا التيبل مال شو, هالبارت مال التيبل شو اسمه for يعني المهم حق non smokers and lung diseases. بسوي again the row total يعني الفاليو اللي كان هني فوق والفاليو اللي كان هني والفاليو اللي كان هني فوق, يعني this value و this value 150 sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna multiply 120 by 150 بيطلع لي or times divide by 300 بيطلع 60. Okay, الحين بسوي another بطلع هالرقم اللي هني. كيف طلعه؟ يلا non smokers and no lung diseases. المهم اللي هو هالفاليو اللي هني times هالفاليو هني حق التيبل هذا اللي هو 180 times 150. okay, 180 times 150 كله over 300 بيطلع لي a value. what's the value 90. so الحين what we generated هالرقم كان هني, هالرقم كان هني, هالرقم هني, هالرقم هني, هالرقم هني. So I can replicate this table again and give you the expected table. So the expected data ما عليكم يحسوني. Okay, so the expected data for smokers and non-smokers واللي عندهم lung disease واللي ما عندهم no lung disease, okay, is basically we're just gonna put the numbers. فبيكون 60 90 60 90. so this is the expected value اللي المفروض نطلع. okay, so if we go back نحن شو نبغى نطلع الحين؟ نبغى نطلع chi squared شوفي في the observed minus the expected. طلعنا expected توا وعنا ال observed already. so now I'm just gonna do a summation of all of this خرابيط. it's gonna be a lot بس يعني stick with me. okay, so الحين شو بنسوي؟ we're gonna get the chi squared basically is the summation of شو the observed minus the expected كله squared over the expected. طبعا how many summations are we gonna have? 4. ليش؟ لأن we have lung disease and non-smokers, no lung disease and smokers, lung disease with non-smokers and no lung disease no non-smokers. فبيكون عندنا 4 parts. so chi squared is basically summation of 4 summations. okay, the first one مثلا أقول لكم أنا بكتب shortcut lung disease and smokers and smokers. No lung disease and smokers. Lung disease and non-smokers. And lung disease and no lung disease. No lung disease and non-smokers. Okay, so الحين I'm just gonna plug the values. الobserved مال the lung the شوي فاضي يا أخي. المهم the observed of the lung disease and non-smokers from the observed table, move the expected data. You're gonna go up here. شو كان observed of the lung disease and non-smokers? 90. So I'm gonna plug 90. Okay, minus the expected of the lung disease and smokers. هذا expected هذا table expected data. Okay, you're gonna go here and the lung disease and smokers كان 60. So minus 60 كله squared. قلنا اللي تحت هو أصلا already expected فيعني 60. Okay, so you're gonna do this for all of them. تروحون عند table طلعوا the value of the expected and the observed بس plug it in. So ها بيكون 60 minus 90 over 90 كله squared. يعني let's do مثلا هذا. Okay, اللي عندهم lung disease and they're non-smokers. So lung disease and non-smokers. نحن أول شيء شنو بنطلع the observed. Go back to the table. Lung disease and non-smokers are 30. So عندنا the value of 30 minus بعدين شو نبغى the expected value from the expected data of lung disease and non-smoker. So lung disease and non-smoker كان 60. So minus 60 كله squared over 60. 60 ليش أنا هني بعدين نفس الفاليو. هذا بعد 120 minus 90 كله squared 90. الزبدة اللي بيطلع لنا الكاي squared which we calculated is equal to 50. طلع لنا هالفاليو. الحين شو أسوي بهالفاليو؟ I'm gonna compare it to the chi-squared from the table. chi-squared table. Okay. طبعا في table وكل table. شوفوا التيبل مثلا مني. شوي table مني. table وين راح؟ مني. هذا التيبل. التيبل on the x-axis you can see the significance level. Did they give us the significance level? Yeah. قالوا لنا في السؤال significance level of 0.05. On the y-axis you can see degree of freedom. So يعني أنا الحين يوم بسوي the x or the chi-square table ولا بطلع chi-square table of a degree of freedom and a significance level. Okay, شو كان degree of freedom? Degree of freedom كان عبارة عن the column minus 1 times the row minus 1. How many columns do we have? We have 2 columns minus 1. How many rows do we have? We have 2 minus 1. بيطلع لي 2 minus 1 is 1, 2 minus 1, 1 times 1 is 1. So the degree of freedom اللي we're looking at in the table is 1. What's the significance level? Go back to the question. Significance level of 0.05. Of 0.05. Then I want to go to the table and look at degree of freedom of 1 and the significance level of 0.05. 1 or 0.05 is 3.841. Okay? So, بيطلع لي x or chi-squared table is 3.841. Okay, الحين what do? I have the calculated and I have the table. I'm gonna go back to the rule اللي شو قاعد يقول لكم إذا the calculated أكبر عن التable we reject the null hypothesis. These are the conditions. إذا الرقم اللي حصلناه اللي we calculated أكبر عن التable we just reject the null hypothesis. إذا كان العكس إذا كان أصغر we fail to reject the null hypothesis. Okay, so هني شو كان الvalue؟ كان عندنا the chi-square calculated طلع لنا شو 50. okay with the chi-squared from the table شو طلع لنا 3.841. الحين أي واحد أكبر the calculated. إذا calculated أكبر عن التيبل يعني شو we reject the null hypothesis. شو كان يقول null hypothesis? That there's no association. If we reject the null hypothesis يعني the alternative hypothesis is true. يعني there is يعني أنت الحين رايت الحين الدكتور there is an association between these two categorical variables which is يعني smoking status and the disease. الحين في السؤال طبعا الدكتور قرر يتفنن ويعور راسنا زيادة ويسألنا stuff like relative risk و odd risk of whatever يعني of شو for lung disease comparing smokers to non-smokers. okay الحين كيف نحسب الريلاتيف ريسك؟ الريلاتيف ريسك شوي راسي يعورني منه. اوكي هني احس وين الدكتور بيقعد يتفنن ويانا في الامتحان. اوكي so relative risk basically is the risk of the smokers over risk of the non-smokers. أنا ليش أقول لكم إن الدكتور يمكن يتفنن؟ أنا ليش حطيت smokers فوق و non-smokers تحت؟ يمكن أقدر أعكسها، بس look at the question كانوا يقولون شو compare smokers compared to non-smokers. إذا قالوا لكم non-smokers compared to smokers هني you flip it the other way around. Okay so هني when you find the relative risk you put the something to something بنحطي هذا فوق وهذا تحت. Okay so this is how you find the relative risk. الحين أبى أطلع the risk of smokers. كل واحد بقعد أحسبها الحين بروحي. So the risk of smokers is the smokers who have the lung disease, okay, over the smokers both that have the lung disease and no lung disease. The smokers who had the lung disease كانوا شو 90 شخص over the smokers who had lung disease بعد is 90 plus 60. أنا جبت هالأرقام من أي تيبل؟ okay. هذا شو okay so the smokers okay that had the lung disease كانوا 90 شخص و the smokers who had no lung disease هو 60 شخص. فأنا بسوي the smokers with lung disease over the total يعني 90 plus 60. الحين إذا بطلع the risk in non-smokers فبسوي the smokers اللي فيهم the lung disease over the total of non-smokers. يعني I'm gonna go الحين تحت هالبارت شوي بيعور راسكم بس look at the notes. I'll send you the notes. Look at the notes you'll get it شوي 0.60 risk of non-smokers is equal to the non-smokers that have the disease بسيجي for shortcut و non-smokers who have the disease and or plus don't have the disease. okay which is شو قلنا اللي كانوا عندهم the disease و they're non-smokers 30 والتوتال كان 130 plus 120 بيطلع لكم 0.20. الحين I'll go back to this equation. okay طلعنا risk of smokers طلعنا risk of non-smokers just plug so بيطلع 0.6 over 0.2 which is 3. الحين طلعنا the relative risk which is 3. okay the last part شو كان يقول calculate the OR. شنو OR؟ it's odds ratio. ليش قلت odds risk قبل شوي؟ odds ratio of شو ليش قاعد أتكلم تاني مس عربي؟ المهم of comparing smokers to non-smokers. again الدكتور قرر يتفنن it's gonna be with these things over here. okay so pay attention. so I want to find the odds يعني of smokers to non-smokers يعني ولا smokers to non-smokers. the equation is gonna look something like this. يعني بحط smokers فوق non-smokers تحت. odds و خليني أشرح لكم إياه تحت. okay so the odds ratio okay basically is the odd in smokers over the odd in non-smokers. الحين بحسب بروحه كل واحد the odd in smokers و the odd in non-smokers كل واحد بروحه. so the odds in smokers equals to the smokers with the disease over the smokers without the disease. okay كان 90 over 60 which is 15. with the odd for non-smokers خلاص يعورني خلاص smokers equals to the non-smokers that have the disease over the non-smokers that don't have the disease. again من وين جبت هالأرقام؟ هذا كله from the expected values مو from the هذا كله from the observed data مو from the expected data. 30 over 120. so يعني if you just want to fact check me مرة واحدة the non-smokers that the smokers that have the disease are 90. Go back to the table. The smokers that have the disease are 90. Okay, the smokers that don't have the disease are 60. عشان شي سوينا شو 90 over 90 over 60. The non-smokers that have the disease كانوا 30 وال non-smokers that did not have the disease were 120. Again بس الحين plug بيطلع 0.25. So the odds ratio is basically 1.5 over 6. 1.5 over 0.25 بيطلع لنا 6. So the odds of having a lung disease is 6 times higher for smokers than non-smokers. This is the basic translation of شو قاعدين نسوي الحين. So the odds for lung disease is higher by 6 times for smokers than non-smokers. Okay, so هالبارت اللي تحت again it's شوي confusing. What you put فوق what you put تحت how you translate it is a bit confusing. حل الأسئلة you'll get it. Look at the notes شرحتها شوي in details. بس I think that's it so far يعني for this chapter, like how to solve this question completely. و again لا تنسون تكتبون هذا completely, لا تكتبون بس جي أنا ما أعرف عبيطة, and give a conclusion. And when they're telling you to calculate the risk factor, look at what the thing they're comparing to. So smokers to non-smokers, not non-smokers to smokers. Here the values بيفرق. Okay. I think that's it so far. Good luck guys.